I feel like your business matches up really closely to one of my favorite strategies for starting a business, which I've talked about a couple times. It's a strategy that I use for indie hackers, which got acquired by Stripe. It's a strategy that Peter Levels used for Nomad List. And he's making millions of dollars a year in revenue from that and its spin-off products. Same strategy that Lentai used in Key Values, which I think she makes like around 400 grand a year with Key Values, and it's just her, no employees. And I think if you go through this process, you have a pretty good chance of building a profitable business. So I want to share it with you, and you tell me what you think and whether it applies to you. It's kind of a 3-step process. So the first step is you notice something in your life that's important to you and where you're doing a lot of research. So in my case, I wanted to start a bootstrap company. It was important to me. I started doing a ton of research to find other people who had done this so I could learn as much as I could. In your case, like you wanted a job in Japan, so you're doing all this research, looking at all these different companies, you're applying, you're getting really familiar because it's just a lot to take in. Or in Peter Levels' case, he was a digital nomad, and he was doing a ton of research about places to go and live and be a nomad, and he wanted to know how safe it was and what the cost of living was and how fast the internet was, and that just required like a ton of different research all over the web. So that's step 1. Step 2 is you got to take all your research and you got to make it presentable. And that means like number 1, other people have to care about this research. It can't just be you. But then step 2 involves you need to put it on a website somewhere, in a list or a grid format. I think the grid's pretty popular. Indie Hackers in its early days was just a grid of interviews. Nomad List is a grid of cities. Japan Dev is sort of a grid of just jobs. And what's important really isn't the grid. What's important is that you know your target audience and what they want, so that your research, when you put it online, is formatted in a way that gives it to them. And then you have step 3, which I think is the hard part, which is what we're about to talk about, which is you got to distribute it. It's got to be discoverable. So it's not good enough for you just to have this all on the web, but you need to somehow get it out there in front of people who are doing the research that you were trying to do. But now when they're doing that research, they'll stumble across your thing, hopefully. And so with Indie Hackers, I knew that hey, everyone who wants to do this is looking at Hacker News, so I'll post it there. With Nomad List, I think Peter Levels is in all these different basically Twitter threads where he's posting Nomad List and these different articles or targeted digital nomads. And so people who are doing research would find his website. And with you, you mentioned SEO, right? If I'm trying to find a job in Japan and I'm, a foreigner, what do? I do research by going to Google and searching for it, just like I did earlier. And that's where you need to be for people to find you. So I do want to dive into that. How do you execute this third step of the process? How did you get yourself found by Google?
Well, first of all, I think that framework is totally on point. That's exactly what I did. And like you said, the third step was definitely the hardest for me since I had never really done any marketing. And unfortunately, it was also the slowest because I was relying, I would say the main distribution channel that we ended up using was SEO, especially Google. Because like you said, that is pretty much where the traffic comes from for this kind of niche that I am focused on. So, a big part of that was just writing blog content, basically related topics to getting jobs. I mean, because the job board itself, those pages will target keywords if you search Python jobs in Japan or PHP jobs in Japan, all those kind of, I created pages, separate pages basically to cover all of those for all of the different programming languages and that kind of thing. And then the next step was just basically writing content for our blog, which answered questions that people like me would have. So, one of the most popular ones I had early on was the salary guide that I wrote. I was focused really on these more international companies, and here's what you can actually earn as a software developer, based on the level, your seniority and all that kind of thing. And another one was just an overall guide that I had for moving to Japan as a software developer. So I was writing, lots of blog posts, and also just the page structure matters a lot as well. Making sure you have kind of separate pages, like I said, rather than just one big page that is going to be only hiring, only really targeting 1 or 2 keywords. So that was something that I learned. Peter Levels, who you mentioned, is another good example of this with Nomad List. He has tens of thousands of pages, I'm pretty sure, because each filter is its own page. And I read this article about that and I'm oh, wow, I see. So you got to split the pages up. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff I did, posting on the Google Jobs, the Google Jobs network or whatever. There's this feature where it'll show the jobs in the search engine result. So adding the markup to enable that gave me a pretty good boost actually in traffic. I guess those were probably the main things that I was doing for SEO. But the problem is that it is slow and it compounds. And you change something and you see the fruits of that literally 3 to 6 months later. So that is why I had this really long lag time. And during that time, I was definitely improving the UX and everything as well to just make it super easy to find the apply button. And the other thing, I guess, was the email list. I didn't know this at first, when I first built the site, but